delegated my vote to Jim in case of to pop out for votes coming up in the chamber. Clerk, any other apologies received or any member to delegate authority?
Gemma, as I said, is delegating to Melissa, and yourself is delegating to Jim, and Matthew has indicated he will delegate to Pat until he arrives. Okay.
All members are obliged to declare any relevant financial or other interests at each committee meeting as applicable. Have any members any relevant interest to declare? No interest to declare. Dear person's business, I would like to thank members of the committee for the contributions to the committee motion on the draft 22-25 budget debate on the 7th of March 22. It is hoped that a successor Finance Committee will work with other statutory committees in the same way, and that in future a debate like this will be a likely milestone in an agreed budget process. Our counterpart committees in Scotland and Wales have invited the chairperson to attend an informal Teams discussion on the 22-25 budget settlement next week. Can I ask the committee if it is content for the chairperson or deputy chairperson to attend this informal meeting on its behalf, diaries permitting? Is this agreed? Fair enough. Okay. Draft minutes then of proceedings. The draft minutes of the Finance Committee meeting of the 2nd of March 22 are at page 6. Are members content that the draft minutes of the 2nd of March 22 are an accurate record of proceedings? Is this agreed? Agreed. Okay, and members, there are no matters arising. So now we're jumping on to
agenda item 8.
Agenda item 8, members, which is SR 70 prescribed fees even. The department has made SR 2270 the building prescribed fees amendment regulations Northern Ireland 2022. A clerk's note is at page 116 and the SR is at page 118 in your packs. The rule will lead to an initial increase of 17.5% to prescribed fees to take effect on the 1st of April 22 and a second increase of 17.5% to take effect on the 1st of April 23. The fees in question are payable to a district council where an application for building regulations approval is made to erect one or more small domestic buildings, Schedule 1, or to extend or alter a small building, Schedule 2. The SR is subject to negative resolution procedure. The committee considered the proposed rule on the 16th of February 2022 and had no objections. The rule would come into operation on the 1st of April 2022. Any members, any view on that? Or we're content at this stage? Happy enough? No? Happy enough. Okay. The committee has considered SR 22/70, the Building Prescribed Fees Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, has no objection to the rule. Is this agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you, members. Item 9, SR 71, Fire Safety. The Department has made SR 2022/71 the Building Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022. A clerk's note is at page 133 and the SR at page 135. The rule will introduce changes to building regulations so as to require material used for external walls or balconies, etc., to achieve a minimum performance classification for relevant buildings such as flats, hospitals, residential schools, student halls of residence and nursing homes over 18 metres in height. The Department advises that this approach is to maintain clarity and consistency with England and Wales. The rule will also require the use of the Radiant in Northern Ireland in an indicative atlas in order to ensure greater accuracy in respect of radon assessment for new homes. The SR is subject to negative resolution procedure. The committee considered the proposed rule on the 2nd of February 2022 and had no objections. The rule would come into operation on the 1st of April 2022. Members, any views? Nope, no views. If members are content, the committee has considered SR 2022/71, the Building Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, has no objection to the rule. Is this agreed? Agreed. Okay. Next one, item 10, SR 67, Civil Service Pensions. The Department has made SR 67/2022, the Public Service Civil Servants and Others Pensions Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022. A clerk note is at page 147 and the SR at page 148. The rule covers a number of typographical and grammatical changes, and I just note changes are spelt wrong. Changes to legislation relating to certain types of statutory leave entitlement associated with the recent birth/adoption of a child. The circumstances when pensionable earnings can be limited to 1/3 for industrial staff. More flexible interaction of the Alpha scheme with the Partnership Pension Scheme. and removing the requirement to nominate an unmarried partner in order for them to receive a pension, so as to give effect to the Supreme Court's decision in the Brewster Judicial Review case. The SR is subject to negative resolution procedure. The committee considered the proposed rule on the 16th of February 2022 and had no objections. Parts of the rule would take effect retrospectively from April the 1st, 2014 or 1st of April 2019. Members, any views? No views? Okay. The committee has considered SR 67 stroke. Let me pause there a second. Jim, can you hear us okay? Jim Wells, yeah?
Yes, can you hear me?
That's fine, yep, that's fine, just checking. So the committee has considered SR 67 stroke 2022, the Public Service, Civil Servants and Others Pensions Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, has no objection to the rule. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Item 11, members, SR 76 rural ATMs. The department has laid SR 76 stroke 2022, the rates exemption for automatic tallying machines in rural areas, Order Northern Ireland 2022. A clerk's note is at page 173 and the SR at page 174. The rule will continue the rates exemption for separate entries into the valuation list associated with around 43 automatic tallying machines or ATMs in designated rural areas. The list of designated areas is provided in the copy of SR 2020-160, which is appended for information. The exemption will apply to any ATM which are valued individually, for example, those located outside petrol stations or on High Street. ATMs located in banks, building societies or shops tend not to be valued for rating purposes. The department estimates the cost as per 100,000 per annum for the 43 ATMs. The SR is subject to affirmative resolution procedure. The committee considered the proposed rule on the 2nd of March 2022, and although the committee wrote to the Minister setting out its concerns and seeking clarity on the exemption, it had no objections to the rule. The rule would come into operation the day after the day on which it is affirmed by the Assembly. Members, any views on that rule? I have a couple of points on that. Maybe discussed this last week. We talked about 50 and then the clarification of the 43. And in your note, and I think I've seen it in the pack, tend not to be valued for rating purposes. Yeah. So is that, as an ATM inside a SPAR or whatever, is not relevant at all? So whether that building has it or has it not, it's no factor on its rates at all.
That would appear, well, it certainly doesn't get the exemption, and what the department's saying is they're not rated for, they're not valued for rating purposes, so that the exemption applies to those in the designated areas, but whether kind of like a standalone ATM, and there's only 43, and as the official said last week, the number's dropping. So it's still a good thing, but it's probably, I think the committee felt not good enough, and maybe more things could be done to support banking services in rural areas.
So does that, the question I suppose I have is that mean there's 43 in areas that are designated, but there could be areas that's not designated, so therefore they don't get the relief?
Exactly, so that's why, Chair, the committee asked for a map. Yeah. So what ATMs are going to benefit and exactly where they are, because there's a list of areas, but my geography is not brilliant, and maybe how they're recorded might not be entirely familiar, though I'm sure it is for members in their own constituency. So we've asked for further clarity on this. This comes to the Assembly week after next for debate, and hopefully we'll have the answer out of the department before then. Okay, members, any other views? We content at that? Okay. The committee has considered SR 76/2022, the rates exemption for automatic tallying machines in rural areas, Order Northern Ireland 2022, and recommends that it be affirmed by the Assembly. Is this agreed? Agreed. Thank you, members. Next one is item 12, SR 77, back in business. The department has made SR 77/2022 the rates temporary rebate amendment order Northern Ireland 2022. A clerk's note is at page 188 and the SR at page 189 of your packs. The rule will allow any new business which occupies a long-term vacant property valued as a retail unit to pay rates at the vacant rating level, which is 50% for a 2-year period. This is to reinstate the back in business scheme which expired in 2017 in the absence of an executive. The department is to undertake an economic appraisal of the scheme in 22-23. The cost is given as 500,000 in rates foregone. The committee considered the SL1 at its meeting on the 2nd of March
2022, and although it had no objection to the policy intent, it agreed to write to the Department seeking clarity on the definition of a new business. So the SR is subject to affirmative resolution procedure and would come into effect immediately and for the duration of 22-23. So, Clerk, remember we discussed the example if a business opened another shop in another town. Is that a new business or is it?
It's a good question. The Department hasn't replied to us on that yet, but it's still, I think, I think Department hasn't replied to us on that yet. My reading of it is that it wouldn't have to be a brand new business, that it could be a business relocating, it would be my reading of it, but the Department has not answered.
Okay. So we hope to get clarity on that point between now and then, and it's going through the Assembly anyway till it agrees. So our members, any other members, any comment on that, or are we content enough based on what we see in front of us? Happy enough? Okay. The committee has considered SR 77/2022, the Rates Temporary Rebate Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2022, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, recommends that it be affirmed by the Assembly. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, members, thank you. We're going to move on to item 13, which is SL1, Social Sector Value Regulations. The Department proposes to make the Rates Social Sector Value Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022 under powers conferred by Article 23A of the Rates Northern Ireland Order 1977. A clerk note is at page 185 and the SR at page 186 of your packs. The Rates Social Sector Value Regulations Northern Ireland 2007 allows the Department the discretion to allow properties owned by the Northern Ireland Housing Executive or Housing Association to be charged rates on the basis of a social sector value relating to the rent payable rather than the basis of the property's actual rateable capital value. This permits the Department to ensure that similar properties in the social housing sector have the same rates liability, regardless of their location, and is consistent with the way in which rent is already calculated in this sector. The proposed rule is a technical amendment to reflect a name change of one of the housing associations. The rule is subject to negative resolution procedure, and it is proposed that it would come into effect on the 1st of April 2022. Members, any views on that? No? Is the committee content with the policy intention of the proposed rule and is therefore content for the Department to make the rule? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Item 14, members, SL1, Superannuation Victims of Crime Commissioner Designate. The Department proposes to make the Superannuation Victims of Crime Commissioner Designate Order Northern Ireland 2022 under powers conferred by the Superannuation Northern Ireland Order 1972. A clerk's note is at page 189 and the SR at page 200. The proposed rule is designed to make pension provision under the Principal Civil Service Pension Scheme Northern Ireland, i.e. the Alpha Scheme, for the Victims of Crime Commissioner Designate. A further SR will be devised when the Victims of Crime Commissioner is appointed by the DOJ in the next mandate. This SR is designed to give the Commissioner Designate pension protection until the formal appointment is made. The rule is subject to negative resolution procedure, and it is proposed that it would come into effect by the 1st of April 2022. Members, any views? Happy enough? Okay, if members are content, is the committee content with the policy intention of the proposed rule, and it is therefore content for the Department to make the rule? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. So
I think we run on, we're okay, because you have to go, probably have to.
approximately, I will keep going if we're content.
We'll
Yeah.
run on, if that's okay, Chair.
So we'll go back to.
No, I would continue actually, and we could.
Okay, do the legacy report.
if we can.
Okay, no problem. The committee will now consider its draft legacy report at page 203. So, Clerk, do you want to give us a wee overview?
So, Chairperson, you can see from about page 206 quite a lot of factual stuff, and then a wee summary from page 208 of everything that the committee has been up to in this shortened mandate. So, we did quite a lot on the review of executive spending and budgets. There was quite a bit on an independent fiscal council for which the committee produced a report. Additionally, the committee spent some time thinking about the Northern Ireland Protocol and Brexit, and also quite a lot of evidence was taken on building regulations and fire safety, the RHI inquiry and NICS reform. But there was a big bit of legislation. Now, our legislative burden was not the same as, say, the Health Committee or even Justice, but we had about 4 bills to to work through, which members did, as well as a legislative consent motion relating to public sector pensions. So all of that is largely factual. The words there are generally the executive summaries, which I've messed about a bit from the reports that we produced. In terms of issues, suggested issues for a successor committee, which is what this is really about, that's at page 218. So what the committee might want to suggest, remember the successor committee is not bound to do any of these things at all, but what it might want to suggest to it is that the successor committee picks up on the Independent Fiscal Council, because that has now been paused, obviously, because of the absence of an executive. There are further bits to do on financial scrutiny, so some progress has been made with the financial reporting bill and the production of the estimates memoranda, but there's more to play for there. There may be more discussion about tax varying powers, but we hope to see the Fiscal Commission report in the next week or two, the final report. But there was quite a lot of sort of interesting things that they told us, whether you are in favour of more tax varying, the evolution of more tax varying powers or not. And then there are questions around RHI, which the committee didn't quite get to unpack. I think it'd be fair to say in this mandate, with plenty of other things to do. Did some work on it, but there's probably more to say. And then there's the question of rates. Reval 2023, which we're about to hear about, will be an area of interest. There were various things that were said during the passage of the non-domestic rates valuations bill about how rates are gathered and the methodology, etc. There was a review done in 2019 which was never completed, so there may be a bit more of interest there. So that's essentially what it says. The following appendices then give you some ideas about numbers and how many meetings the committee did and how many stat rules it passed. Quite a lot is the answer for only a 2.5-year mandate. So there's quite a lot to look at in terms of what the committee's done and by way of what the successor committee might do. So, Chairperson, could I ask if members have any comments or amendments they'd like me to make?
I just have one question. Obviously, if we're agreeable on this, we're agreeing on what we see in front of it. And as you've noted here, if there's additional items discussed in the next few meetings, that adds in.
Yeah.
Is there a point of time to review the whole document again?
Do you want to see it again? That's okay. I can bring it back on at the last meeting.
So if there was let's say there's a few changes or no changes, you can advise, but we're sort of agreeing what's there now.
Yeah, if that's okay.
No, anybody, any views or comments? No?
Sure.
Sorry.
It's just from the point of view of trying to meet outside of this building more and spread this out. That, it would have been great if we could have outreached this. I know there was a willingness across all of us. In fact, it was the issues that stated that, and we were in agreement with it. So it'd be good if we get back or in the next mandate that we try to spread it out a little bit and
Head a little bit west.
Bring government out west. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Just for me to go out and see that there is such a place. That's a bad joke.
Okay.
Can add words to that effect, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Happy enough. Any other comments? Happy enough. Okay. So is the committee content to order the legacy report to be published as its 8th report of this mandate, with the additional meeting data which will be added later, and with the amendments that members have indicated? Is this agreed? At what point, Chair, do you issue that?
Do you want me to bring it back?
I personally would prefer you bring it back,
Okay.
unless you're under a time restraint.
No, I'm not. I think what we can do is bring it back to the final meeting, and then so we'll not actually agree to publish it right now. We'll wait.
As long as members are content with that. Yeah.
That's okay. Yep. Okay.
Content.
Yep. No
Okay,
problem.
thank you. Do we want to go through correspondence?
Please, could you, and then we'll, because we can just put that away then.
Okay, members. Members are asked to note the index of the 15 received items of correspondence at page 228. First item is budget bill and vote on account. The committee is asked to note at page 231 a departmental response to committee queries on the budget bill and vote on account. The department can't clarify as yet on the approximate 400 million additional money associated with the national insurance increases. A copy of the minister's letter to the other executive ministers on the budget for 21-22 is appended. Is the committee content to note this corresponding pending a briefing later this month on the impact of the absence of the executive on spending decisions? Is this agreed?
Great.
Great.
Okay. Item 16.3, Aggregates Levy and the Apprenticeship Levy. The committee is asked to note at page 238 a response from the Fiscal Commission on the Aggregates Levy and the Apprenticeships Levy. It is confirmed that the substantial related sums were unhypothesated and were therefore not necessarily used for environmental or apprenticeship schemes. Is the committee content to note this corresponds ahead of the anticipated forthcoming briefing by the Commission? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Item 16.4, a monthly forecast and outturn data for January 2022. The committee is asked to consider at page 242 the monthly forecast and outturn data for January 2022. Is the committee content to forward to the Assembly Research?
Agreed.
Is this agreed? Yep. I made a picture.
Out of paper. Thank you.
Item 15. Okay. Sorry about that, members. Item 16.5. Yep. Period Products Free Provision Bill. The committee is asked to note at page 269 corresponds from the Minister of Finance and Minister of Education on the Period Products Free Provision Bill, both indicating that further information is required in respect of costs and neither identified the lead department. However, it was subsequently reported in the press that the Department for Communities will be in the lead for this.
I think it's moved on, Chair.
Do you want to give us a, well, that debate was yesterday, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
so I think that the lead is the Department of Communities, but I think that they're covering that for the Executive Office, as I read it.
So they were covering the debate,
Yes.
but the lead on the provision, shall we say,
is the Minister of Communities. Is
GEO?
Yeah.
Communities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Pat, for that update. I appreciate that. So, members, as per my previous comments, is the committee content to note this correspond for item 16.5? Yeah? Happy enough, members? Yes?
Yep.
Item 16.6, Omicron support. The committee is asked to note at page 275 a ministerial response on the extension of Omicron support to the hospitality supply chain and other businesses. The Minister advises that it is for the Department for the Economy to suggest such a scheme and that this would require executive agreement. Is the committee content to note this correspondent? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Item 16.7, ISNI. The committee is asked to note at page 281 the Capital Activity Report for February 2022. Is the committee content to note this correspondence? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Dale allocations, item 16.8. The committee is asked to note at page 284 ministerial correspondence providing information on further 45 million resource Dale allocations for 2021 to 22 to the Department of Education, the Department for Communities and the Department for Infrastructure. Is the committee content to note this correspond?
No.
Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Okay, members, item 16.9, death certificates. The committee is asked to consider at page 297 a response from the Minister of Health on the continued temporary waiving of the requirement to notify the coroner where a death occurs and the deceased has not seen the doctor in the previous 28 days. The Minister has advised that the Department of Health has no information on the number of death certificates that would be ordinarily issued under these circumstances. The committee is also asked to note the Department of Finance correspondent advising that the General Register Office can also not provide the relevant information. Is the committee content to note this correspondence and for me to reference this during the debate on the relevant SR, indicating our dissatisfaction and concerns? Is this agreed, members?
Agreed.
Yep. Item 16.10, new permanent secretaries. The committee is asked to note at page 302 departmental correspondence confirming the new the permanent secretaries for communities and finance are members of the NICS, but that other appointments might be filled as a secondment. Is the committee content to note this correspondence? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Item 16.11, Ulster Grand Prix and North West 200. The committee is asked to note at page 304 a departmental response clarifying approximately 800,000
funding for the Department for Economy for the Ulster Grand Prix and North West 200 and the related conditions. Is the committee content to note this correspondence?
No.
Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Happy? Okay. 16.12 Defamation Bill. The committee is asked to note at page 309 further correspondence from the bill sponsor on the defamation bill. Is the committee content to note this correspondence? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Item 16.13 Online Safety Bill. Sorry.
I just need to go back to the Ulster Grand Prix. I'm sorry to bring this back. That funding has now been, am I reading that funding is now secured?
That's what they've indicated, Chairperson, that there were conditions, but the
Yes,
£800,000, whatever it was, has been secured. But
that is in my constituency, and I have to welcome it. I'm not to do it here though, but I mean, there was a scare that the race may well have been cancelled. So I just think that should be noted.
Okay.
Thanks, sorry about that.
No problem. And you're content with the correspondence?
Yes, I am indeed.
Did we do Online Safety Bill?
no, we're just at number 13.
Okay. 16.13 Online Safety Bill. The committee is asked to note at page 310 a response from the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for Technology and the Digital Economy on the Online Safety Bill. Is the committee content to note this correspondence? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, members, three more pieces of correspondence. So 16.14 Witness Diversity. The committee is asked to note at page 314 a copy of the ad hoc committee report on enhancing witness diversity. Is the committee content to note this correspondence? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, 16.15 Women's Policy Group. The committee is asked to note at page 325 correspondence from the Committee for the Economy providing a copy of the Feminist Recovery Plan produced by the Women's Policy Group on the employment, in brackets in, zero hours workers and banded weekly hours bill. Is the committee content to note this correspondence? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. 16.16 Concerned Correspondent. The committee is asked to note at page 393 correspondence from an individual on the application of Section 75 rules by the Department for Economy in respect of university appointments. It is understood that the Committee for the Economy and PAC have already received this correspondence. As other more relevant committees have considered this correspondence, is the committee content to note this correspondence?
Noted.
Is this agreed? Okay.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you, members. Do you want to do the composite information, or do you want to?
Could you do the
Okay.
composite and then
So 16.17 composite information request. So members are asked to consider the composite request at page 490. Is the committee content that the composite request is an accurate and complete record of the committee's information requests? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, members.
we'll put it to item 6.
Come back or not?
Oh, thank you.
Okay, members, we're going to go back to item 6, rates debt management strategy. And just say before maybe the briefing starts, I may have to pop out if we get an indication. I don't know what way you want to work that, Clerk.
We'll see what happens, Chairperson, because we'll have to appoint a temporary chair if that happens. But let's worry about that when it happens.
Okay, so the committee will now receive an oral briefing from Land and Property Services on rates debt management. I don't know where the page is. The photocopier.
Yeah, probably in the photocopier. Hi there.
Hello.
Over there. Okay, Ian, formerly your Chief Executive of LPS, will give you a form and then we'll go into Ian afterwards if you're happy enough for that. You're very welcome. And Judith Andrews, Director of Revenues Benefits LPS. You're both very welcome. Here, there's water and all in front of you there. And members, I'm going to draw your attention to the Clerk's brief at page 16, a departmental briefing page 21, a copy of LPS annual report and accounts for 2020-21 at page 28, and previous departmental correspondence on debt write-off arrangements at page 72. Ian and Judith, you're welcome to the Committee for Finance. You want to provide members with your opening statements, whoever one of you want to go first, on new rates, debt management strategy, and then whichever you want to lead off, and then we'll get into a few questions afterwards if you're happy enough to start. Okay, Ian, go ahead. Thanks, you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, in terms of rating debt, we have been on a bit of a journey in LPS in terms of managing it. Before the pandemic, we had made significant progress in increasing rating cash collection levels to over £1.37 billion. which was the revenue assessed as due from the 870,000 domestic and non-domestic properties in the valuation list. Likewise, we had made substantial inroads in reducing rating debt year on year by around 40 million. At its highest point in 2013, it was 168.3 million, and we got that down to 124.4 million as at the 31st of March 2020, just as the pandemic was kicking in.
Judith, may I ask a question that I'm trying to pull up my notes here? What's that like? I didn't do percentage. What's that like in percentage of income? So what's your debt percentage based on what you should be getting in? Is it 8-9%? Would it be as high as that?
It is. Pre-pandemic, we were coming in at around 8%.
Okay.
In 1920, we were 8%. So that's the debt as a percentage of what we call the gross rate income, which is the amount that we need to go out and collect. Post-pandemic, that has increased. We're now at 9.9%.
So what's that like? And then I'll let you continue. What's that like with other areas in the United Kingdom?
Sorry?
What's that like within other areas of the United Kingdom? The debt?
Oh, that compares favourably. Across the water in GB, they tend to be around 10%. So we do compare favourably.
So if you were a business,
across
and
the
this is
water.
no criticism, but if you were a business and your debt was 8%, you wouldn't be there.
Could I just?
And I'm just,
Well, no. If you compare our performance against things like utility companies in Great Britain, which are private sector organisations, their cash collection figures tend to be around 70% of the amount billable.
Okay.
Whereas our cash collection is something like 93% of the total amount billable. So, I mean, we're well ahead of what is achieved by
and that
sector
gives you good
competitors.
perspective, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Judith.
Okay, so I was just talking about the debt. So the debt just pre-pandemic, that was the lowest year-end rating debt in 13 years. That's going back to 2007, 2008. Prior to that, debt had peaked at 168.3 million, as I mentioned, and that was as a result of the economic downturn after the 2008 financial crash. Another component which contributed to that was the introduction of the rating of empty homes policy in October 2011. That actually added some more debt onto the books for us. But to put this all into context, this performance was achieved at the same time as the amount of rating debt written off each year was progressively reduced. What this meant was that LPS had significantly improved its performance in bringing in more of the annual rates that are theoretically collectible after exemptions of 175 million that we pay out each year, and rate support that we also give to ratepayers of 160 million once those are all taken into account. LPS has achieved these improvements in performance by adopting a more targeted approach to collection and recovery. Prior to this, LPS, in terms of collection and recovery, we treated all ratepayers in the same way, and we used what we called a linear process, which had a heavy focus on costly recovery actions being taken at set points in the year. A core part of the new process has been categorising ratepayers into those who can pay, can't pay, and won't pay. Depending on the category of ratepayer, we can adopt an approach that is more likely to result in the debt being paid in each case. Some of the specific actions that we have taken are that we have offered extended digital payment and communication options to ratepayers. We've also improved our processes from lessons learned from other organisations by focusing our resources on cash collection through the use of targeted telephone campaigns and pre-court correspondence using behavioural insights techniques. This was particularly beneficial back in 2014-15 when our staffing numbers were significantly impacted through the voluntary exit scheme, where we lost about 11% of our staff. We've also harnessed the use of internal and external data to profile ratepayers to identify the most expedient route to collection or recovery. And we've piloted the use of external credit reference agencies for more difficult debt, such as that associated with out-of-jurisdiction billing addresses. The onset of the pandemic in March 2020 had an immediate impact on the plans to bill, collect and recover rates during 2021. A number of interventions were quickly agreed by the Executive to support both domestic and non-domestic ratepayers as they came to terms with the restrictions and uncertainties associated with COVID-19. These included substantial financial assistance for businesses through the rate holiday and the postponement of the issue of domestic rate bills until June 2020, with the purpose of alleviating the financial burden on homes in the initial months of lockdown. LPS usually begins legal recovery action through the courts in late summer and early autumn each year. However, in 2020, LPS took a conscious decision not to actively pursue legal recovery action in light of the pandemic. The three main factors that drove this decision were, first of all, the fact that access to the courts throughout 2021 was limited due to the COVID restrictions. This not only prevented LPS taking cases to court to seek decrees and bankruptcy orders, but bankruptcy and liquidation actions by other creditors were not progressed, so the normal levels of bad debt write-off associated with bankruptcy did not materialise. Secondly, LPS had to redirect its staff resources to deliver business support measures. So in the spring of 2020, LPS was called on to deliver the first COVID-19 financial support grant for small businesses. The IEA, that was the Department for the Economy's Small Business Support Grant, the 10,000k scheme, which we've discussed at this committee on a number of occasions. When the second wave of the pandemic came in autumn of 2020, LPS was again involved in the administration of grant support to businesses through the Localised Restriction Support Scheme. Eligibility for both schemes was based on the rating status of the businesses, so large numbers of LPS staff normally engaged on rate collection were diverted to grant administration work. Thirdly, given the scale of the interventions being delivered by LPS to support and protect businesses and the government's support to individuals, it would have been counterproductive to the wider objective of supporting the economy if LPS had simultaneously been taking legal recovery action against some of the same businesses and citizens that we were paying out grants and support to. As a consequence of the above factors, the rating debt position at the end of March 2021 was 152.7 million, and that was an increase of 28.3 million on the previous year, and the highest year-end debt figure since 2014-15. The increase occurred due to a number of factors. First of all, LPS's decision not to pursue legal recovery action during 2021. Another factor was the decision to defer the release of rate bills until the start of June 2020. That resulted in the displacement of payments. So there was 11.6 million that we didn't actually collect until the following April and May of the next rating year. Also, since bankruptcies and liquidations sought by third parties were not being progressed through the courts, the level of bad debt write-off associated with these ratepayers was approximately 10 million lower than in a typical year before the pandemic. So almost 60% of the increase in the net debt position was related to domestic rate arrears. The non-domestic debt profile, it shows a significant increase in prior year debt as at the end of March 21. This was driven to some extent by the ratepayer changes requested to allow businesses to access the business support grants, such as where ratepayers notified LPS of new occupancies of commercial properties that had previously been recorded as vacant in the rating system. This resulted in rating liabilities being raised for both 2019-20 or for previous years, which we then had to collect. So that bunched up a bit of debt that wouldn't have come out except for the grants. There has also been a decrease in current year non-domestic rating debt, which can largely be attributed to the rates holidays granted to businesses. This year, LPS has started to implement a post-pandemic debt recovery strategy, which is building on a number of the improvements we already had in place prior to the pandemics. The objective is to bring the debt back to pre-COVID levels That is below 125 million, and we expect that will take the next 3 years. We plan to do this by focusing on the increased levels of domestic and prior year non-domestic debt, which has risen during the pandemic. Plans include a range of new targeted pre-court actions to prompt the collection of outstanding arrears through focused telephone and correspondence contact, whilst the Northern Ireland Court Service addresses its backlogs and works towards full resumption of its magistrate and bankruptcy court services. In addition, we have established an aged debt team, and this team is reviewing and analysing prior year debt to identify the best pathway for recovery, including detailed considerations of whether taking further legal action would be economically worthwhile. Legal recovery processes have now resumed, and LPS is working closely with its debt recovery partners in the Crown Solicitor's Office, the Enforcement of Judgment Office, and alongside an external debt management company called Endesa, which is the UK government's debt management partner. And with these three partners, we're looking to prioritise the progress of pre-pandemic debt in transit onto resolution.
Okay, thank you. Judith, you're happy enough, Ian? Or
Yes.
Still the questions, I have a couple of questions here. Well, I'm looking at a statement of revenue and expenditure. It says rate revenue 1,539,304,000. Question is, and then it says a wee footnote, go down to 1.3. Revenue is measured at the fair value of the amounts received on receive a bill. So is that figure what you should be getting in theoretically? You know, we always talk about £1.3 billion in rates revenue, but that's a higher figure. Why is that higher?
That figure's higher because the 1.3 is net of all of the exemptions and the rate support that we give out. So that's effectively the difference between those two figures.
Okay, so theoretically and then reductions, fair enough. Okay, I have a few, I'll come back to myself in a wee minute or two. Pat, if you want to come in.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks very much, Judith and Ian. You did say there that an increase of 28.3 million over the 152.7, but you did write off £10 million of debt in that, so would that increase that figure? That's one point. And the second one was the 60% of the current rate debt sits with householders. What's the level of the payment of the domestic rate in terms of the percentage of households that can or won't pay? And do you know across the different district councils what those different levels of payment are? And I also just, it's just a way of thanking you as well, just for the small businesses support grant and the localised businesses support grant and the difficulties that you've tried to manage all of that and your debts through, so you're aware of all of them. But could you address those couple of wee points?
The rating debt write-off. There's always an amount of debt that's written off every year because businesses go bankrupt or individuals go bankrupt or there's nobody to actually recover the money from. So in those cases the debt gets written off. There's the amount that we write off each year is actually down very substantially over the past number of years. So if you were to combine the end of year rate and debt plus rate debt written off during the course of the year, the decline's even steeper than it would be simply for the year-end debt figure. So by the year before the start of the pandemic, I think we were at about 15 million a year, something like that, was written off of written debt, whereas in the middle of the early part of the previous decade, it might have been up around 40 million a year. So we've made a substantial improvement. We've brought the debt down at the same time as reducing the amount written off.
Okay. And the 6% of current rates, the debt that sits with householders, do you have that across where that sits with that level of non-payment? Where does it sit across the district councils? Is there a percentage on that?
We do have information on that. In terms of the pandemic, it did impact some councils more than others. Looking at the movement in the debt, for example, Causeway Coast and Glens, Derry, Strabane, Mid Ulster and Mid and East Antrim, those were the four councils which saw the most significant increase during 2021.
And in your report, you do use external agencies in order to recover your debt?
We've carried out a number of pilots on that over the last number of years, some with more success than others. We did trial back about 3 years ago the use of Stubbs Gazette to target out of jurisdiction debt. That was actually quite successful in that we handed over about £1.5 million to them, and we were able to get about a 25% return on that. And when I say 25% return, some of that was payment in full, some of it was payment arrangements, but some of it as well was actually clarifying the fact that we had the wrong ratepayer in the property, and so we were able to get additional information as to who was liable for the rates.
Would you be in a position to share that information of the different district councils?
Certainly, yeah.
That'd be all right to share with the committee. Thank you.
Okay, Jim Wells.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
You can hear me okay. Sorry, I have no idea whether it can be heard or not. This is the first time I've been on Starleaf. I'm in the middle of coronavirus, but it doesn't spread by Starleaf. Very, very interesting, Ian, your contribution yet again. Like Pat, I'd be very keen to see the distinction between the district councils as to who is paying and who isn't. Now, just a point in the middle of all this, there's been a huge extra burden placed upon your staff over this last 2 years, because you've gone from being a body that collects money to a body that very effectively distributes money. Has that meant that you have reduced your attention on bad debt and non-payment? In other words, has that sort of withered on the vine, as it were, because you've been concentrating on other things?
Obviously, we've had to prioritise what our staff are working on during the past couple of years with the grant activity that's taken place, and by and large, the staff that have been working on the grants have come from Judith's part of the organisation, which is the rate collection part. Now, as Judith explained, there were reasons why we couldn't have pursued the rate debt during the course of the year anyway. The courts weren't open, for example, so we couldn't have taken the legal action that would have been necessary. So those staff could be moved into the grant activity, but I think it's fair to say that we have enough staff to do everything. So some things had to take a lower priority, and the one aspect that we did deprioritise was recovery action, because it was not well aligned to all the other things we were attempting to do with the rate support grants and the rate reliefs.
Could I also ask, what actually happens then regarding that bad debt written off or irrecoverable? Does that reduce the amount of money being passed on to the district councils and the other government agencies, like road service, for instance, street lighting? Who actually takes the pain here in terms of that reduced income?
Well, it reduces the amount of revenue that's collected. So the councils and the executive share that, and that the rate and debt portion, or the portion that's written off, reduces the amount of money that's passed to district councils, as well as the amount that's collected through the regional rate.
Would you build that into the figures? In other words, when you're suggesting a certain grant allocation to the councils, do you assume there'll be £10 million less because of bad debt per council, or do they just get a note eventually saying, sorry folks, but you're going to get a bit less than you expected?
Yeah, if I can explain, each year we work with the councils on what we call the penny product, and so each year we produce an estimated penny product which estimates the amount of revenue that the council will collect. It obviously includes all the value of the properties that are in the list. The councils also bear the cost, for example, of vacant properties, but there is a line in there for write-off, and with the councils we share the debt position, and we have a kind of a whole provision for bad debt, and that's all shared with councils as well. So together we come to an agreed level of write-off for that incoming year. Now, in reality, when the pandemic hit in 2021, the estimated penny product was a kind of a done deal, and the district rate had been struck prior to that. So we didn't realise the level of debt that we had expected. We had expected to be about 15 or 16 million. It came in at 5 million during 2021, And that was because largely to do with bankruptcies. We do initiate some bankruptcies, but a lot come from other creditors. And because those weren't passing through the courts, the level of bankruptcy, usually it's anything from 60 to 70% of the total write-off, it didn't materialise. And so the councils actually then benefited from the fact that we didn't hit the full write-off. That said, going forward, it's part of our debt recovery plan. We will need to do a bit of catch-up around that. And already this year, we haven't got the end of the year, we've already written off 11 million debt. So now that the courts are moving, that debt is now all kind of filtering through. But that's part of our recovery plan, and councils will be privy to that as we go forward.
Thank you.
You, Jim, yeah?
Yeah, I
Thanks.
think that's fine. Thank you.
Militia?
Madam Chair, this is Royal. I think you're both very welcome. And again, too, I'd like to commend your department and the great work they've done over this last number of years and meeting the demands of the economy in every respect, in terms of the pressures that have been placed on it because of COVID. The work of your department has been admirable in dealing with the general public and that as well. Just to come back again to the whole idea, we'll say, of debt and that, and just the point that's been raised that where much of it is as a result, we'll say, of domestic properties. And one would have thought that maybe that at a time of, we'll say, COVID and limitations that were on business, that you could have seen that reflected in the non-domestic. But yet, no, that's not the case. Have you done any sort of analysis at all of why it is that there is so much debt there with domestic properties?
Well, it particularly kicked in during the pandemic year, and what we found was that obviously ratepayers were under pressure. To support that, we actually issued the rate bills a little bit later than usual. It was in June 2020. Most of our domestic ratepayers will pay by instalment, and they'll pay us 10 instalments. So what that did was that kind of shifted the commitment over the year, and it actually pushed some of those payment arrangements out into the next year. Things like, for example, we do offer support through housing benefit and rate rebate. We did have an increase in the uptake of rate rebate during that year, partly due to the pandemic, but partly also just to do with the kind of managed rollout of universal credit. As people's circumstances change, they naturally migrate onto rate rebate. So what we actually found was that, and again, through some of our interventions as well, although domestic ratepayers may not have been able to meet the full liability, they did enter into payment arrangements with us, which just extends the liability into the next financial year.
A couple of other things just to put that into context. There are about 800,000 domestic ratepayers and 75,000 non-domestic ratepayers. So there's a bigger group of people, even though the individual bills might be smaller on average, a bigger group of people who may have some difficulties. In the domestic group, the only council which has a bigger portion of its rate and debt in the non-domestic sector is Belfast, and that's basically because of the number of business properties in the centre of the city and the size of the rate liabilities for some of those properties. Every other council, the majority of the debt sits in the domestic side, between sort of 50 and 65%, depending on from council to council. So it varies from place to place, but it has always been the case that domestic rate debt has been a bigger portion.
And do you have any indication about what in fact are the reasons why it is that people are not in a position to pay their rates?
Some people just don't like to pay rates, and they habitually decline to pay. Some people run into difficulties, financial difficulties, and their issues, and as Jill's explained, there are support arrangements and schemes in place there.
Yeah, and what we've done over the last number of years is just try to understand why both domestic and non-domestic ratepayers aren't paying, and for example, we will review the rating payment history, and during 2021 there definitely was evidence of the pandemic impacting upon domestic households, whether people were losing their jobs, etc. And based on that, we would have signposted them through to the rate rebate. The other thing that we've used over the years and continue to use is what we call propensity to pay, and that gives us an insight into whether a ratepayer is, what I talked about earlier, is a can't pay or a can pay or a won't pay, because we do have examples of ratepayers taking us down through the whole recovery path to the very end when we're maybe going to bankrupt them, and they will pay. So we've tried to use that information to actually take legal action maybe sooner if we know that they can pay and won't pay. So we have used profiling. There can be other things as well. For example, someone moving into a house and for whatever reason there's what we call a backdated bill. So if the bill is for more than 1 year, and that can put people into financial hardship. And in that example, we would look to enter into a payment arrangement with them to spread the load in terms of what they have to pay.
Yeah, there's there are various different kinds of people. There's a sizable enough group of people who believe that we have no right to charge them rates, and I'm a regular correspondence with quite a few of those. There are people who dispute that they're actually liable for the rates on a particular property. People who believe that they shouldn't have to pay rates because the house is empty, even though the law has now been changed. There are people who are in disagreements with their family members about who's liable for it. So there are all kinds of reasons why a person might not pay, as well as people who are in financial difficulty. We also have a sizable chunk of the debt figure every year is in some kind of payment arrangement. So a person may be paying off a backdated bill or an arrears over a number of years. So the debt will continue to appear in the figures even though the rates are being paid down.
Well, just in relation to that, if debt continues to appear and so on, do you engage the services, we'll say, of debt collectors and as such, at what cost, if you do?
We've piloted, I talked about the Stubbs Gazette. That was one exercise that we undertook, and I think we paid probably about £20,000, but on that we got back I think it was £350,000 worth of rating revenue on the back of that. In a lot of ways, we actually partner with our Department of Justice. In some ways, Enforcement of Judgment Office they support us in terms of trying to collect money as well. They have better access to, for example, people's financial records, particularly for individuals, and they also will meet with the individual. They also have powers around, for example, attachment to earnings, garnishee orders, etc. So they have a lot more powers in terms of actually being able to retrieve payment from individuals.
Just finally then, in relation to, say, over that whole period, we'll say, of COVID and grants and the likes of it as well too, the level of rates fraud, whether it's domestic or non-domestic, do you have any sort of estimate of that?
By fraud, what are you thinking of there?
I'm thinking maybe either people that previously, we'll say, where they might not have had a business and then all of a sudden they have a business and they were claiming, we'll say, some of the grants and that and things of that nature. It's like a new dimension that's been introduced at the moment about a change in business, but that during the course of COVID and so on, it might have been the case that where premises were empty, and yet now then you have people claiming grants and the likes of it on those premises.
Well, the way the grant schemes have all worked, you have to have been in occupation of the premises. Now, the rate system always has got a little bit of a lag in it, and we rely quite heavily on information provided by ratepayers to update accounts. So it's fair to say, and Judith mentioned this in her opening remarks, and it's also in the written report, that there are people who were in properties which we had recorded in the system as being vacant, and then whenever the grants became available, they approached us to apply for the grant, at which point then their occupancy became noted. Now, in some cases, it may only have been a matter of weeks. In a couple of cases, it was a year or more. Those people then become liable for the period of rates going back. Whether you call that fraud. Sometimes it's just ignorance of what they have to do. Sometimes they're gaming the system. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons why people might do things. And if they don't get a rates bill, they maybe think they've got away with it for a bit, and keep their heads down. So there's that kind of behaviour which our team has to be aware of and keep on top of.
Yeah, fraud for us is more around the benefits that we pay out. For example, the housing benefit and the rate rebate. That's kind of where our main focus is, that people will claim those potentially fraudulently. So that's something that's scrutinised by the audit office. And for housing benefit, we've been working on that. I know for this particular year, in terms of customer fraud, we have estimates of about 1.2%, and for the other side of that is customer error. We're looking at a slightly higher figure of 5.1%, so that would be scrutinised on the benefit side.
Just it's interesting to note a couple of things about that. I think I maybe said this a couple of times when I've been at the committee, but rates, although it's a tax, is not like other kinds of tax that the HMRC is responsible for. It's not a legal, it's not a criminal offence not to pay your rates. So all our activity is through civil recovery processes. So if a person doesn't provide us with information that they have moved into a new property, that's not it's not a criminal offence in the same way it would be a failure to disclose to HMRC would be a criminal offence. So our range of legal options is much more limited by comparison to some other things. So it's not a legal offence not to pay your rates, though it is a legal offence not to pay car tax or TV licence, for example. So whenever we take our cases through the court, it's not done in precisely the same way. And the obligations on ratepayers to furnish information is not the same. Those are areas in which we might want to take a look at some legislative change eventually to improve the efficiency of the system.
Maybe it would be wise not to tell too many people that. It's not a criminal offence.
I think the people who take advantage of it know it already.
Thanks ever so much for your answers, Cormac. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thanks. Gemma?
Thanks, Chair, and thank you both for coming in. And again, I want to thank you and the rest of the staff in LPS for your help over the past couple of years, and as recently as last week. Yes. Ian, thank you. And I have to apologise because as soon as you answer my question, you have to leave and go to the chamber. But I just have one question, and I know there's a number of different cases and different scenarios, but take, for example, a non or a domestic ratepayer who can't afford to pay their rates. So I know you send out the initial bill and then you send 2 reminders, whatever. What happens then after that, after the third bill?
We always encourage people to make contact with us. Now, if a person genuinely is in financial hardship and can't afford to pay, we'll look at payment arrangements, and there may well be entitlements to benefits or supports or reliefs that they're not aware of. So frequently we'll direct people to the Make the Call service that the AFC run, because that's one way in which they can be sure that they're getting all the reliefs and benefits that they might be entitled to. We have got a reasonably comprehensive system of reliefs in Northern Ireland, because we have, in addition to housing benefit, low income rate relief, and then there's a rate rebate scheme that goes along with universal credit. So there are a number of different ways in which domestic ratepayers can get help with their bills. Yeah,
I'm just thinking though, with the cost of living crisis, and obviously people are struggling, and I mean like the working poor, is there anything, like what would happen, for example, if there was a couple, both of them were working, couldn't afford to pay their rates? Just, is it the payment plan? Is that what they would?
Yeah, that's what we would offer.
Yeah, I mean, we would encourage them to apply, if they're of working age, apply for universal credit, because you can still be working and still be eligible for support with your rates. If they're of pension age, then housing benefit is their gateway in to support, and with that as well, we have what's called low income rate relief, which sits alongside housing benefits. So we try and signpost ratepayers as soon as there's any kind of distress. That's been one of the ways we've changed working, in that instead of just taking people to court straight away, we take maybe more of a soft approach where we will potentially ring the individual up, or we'll send a letter trying to encourage them, if they're having difficulty, to go contact Make the Call in the main through the Department for Communities, and that would then potentially open them the door to both universal credit and then into our rate rebate.
Yeah, and it's general message I would put out. If you're having difficulties and you aren't going to be able to pay the rates, don't leave it until the last minute to contact us. I mean, we'll try and work with people the best we can at an early stage if they contact us.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Gemma, just one final question. You talked earlier about, that 8% thereabouts. What objectives you got within the department? You're obviously trying to improve that all the time, but is there a goal that you are actively working to, and how much finance do you put into that goal to try and push that percentage down or up, whatever way you look at the percentage?
Yeah, currently what we focus on is what we call a percentage collection, to try and improve that. And pre-pandemic, we were sitting, as Ian said earlier, at over 93% collection. That took a dip with the pandemic, so we're trying to build our way back up to that. So for this year, for example, we're working towards 91%, which we're on track for in terms of collection. So that's kind of how we measure ourselves. We always keep a tally on the debt, because that's a figure that people understand, be it ratepayers or yourselves or the citizens. So we'll set internal targets around things like debt and collection, and also the headline in terms of the amount of money as well, because that money is important, because that then goes into the Northern Ireland block, and then it's the money that feeds through to the 11 district councils as well. So that is another figure that we work towards. We'd set a target on that in terms of trying to increase that year on year.
Gemma touched on it there briefly, and we're coming into possibly a more difficult time now, possibly than COVID, because you've no furlough. People's getting really struggling. The only possible thing, we're coming out of winter, if you want to call that a benefit, but fuel costs is extraordinary. Do you have any plans? I know it's maybe early days, and the Ukrainian crisis has only hit, and it's only going to start hitting people now financially. Have you any plans going forward to, coming 22, 23? Is rates going to take a hit? Because as you maybe, it could be the last bill that people, excuse the term, worry about. You know what I mean? It's not the first. But that's going to be landing their mats now, I presume, very soon.
Yeah.
Do you see, next year, financial year, going to be a problem? From your collection point of view?
Yeah, well, yes, I mean, the bills are due to issue beginning the 25th of April, so we're getting back to normality in terms of the billing cycle. Again, we do as much signposting as we can for ratepayers that are in difficulty. The support that is there is fairly generous in that, it can be paid in full, depending upon your circumstances. But it's just really important that domestic ratepayers who are in trouble need to make the call, sign up for universal credit to get access to that. Those who are of a pension age need to go down the housing benefit route. We will look at payment arrangements as well as another solution.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to come on the back of that, because you did specify on domestic, and I'm looking at the businesses, and businesses are delighted with the help that they've got. I'm delighted with that little extension that they've got for the 2 months of this coming year. But whenever they are also fearful when that goes down, because I'm not sure that their revenue has increased in order to try and meet that demand. So no doubt within your planning, you will be looking at those businesses when they come off the aid which they're getting at the moment, are not able to pay. And do we lose the businesses then? Or is there anything more, or any stretch? I know it's up to the minister, but have you put that into your planning? Because a lot of businesses have come to me, and they honestly are fearful after the 2 months at the start of this year coming in. Are you aware of that? I know you always must be.
Any economic impact or any economic shock is going to make it more difficult to deal with the rates revenue, and make it a bigger challenge. There will be more people unable to pay. There'll be more businesses going under. More debt then will accrue because of that. And same thing applies with domestic ratepayers. You'll find it more difficult. So it's factored into the figure work. Now, in terms of support for businesses, that really depends on whether the executive is able to allocate, whenever it comes back after the election, allocate more money to rate support for business. At the minute, we had the agreement to the 3 months for retail, hospitality, tourism, leisure, airports and childcare. So now the legislation has been made for that. That's been assured, and we're able to move ahead. The regional rate has been frozen again for the second year in a row for businesses, third year in a row for domestic ratepayers, and for businesses that was after an 18% cut. So on the regional rate side, there's been an effort to reduce or hold down rates bills. Now, district councils haven't been in a position to do that, so there have been increases between, I think it's 1.9 and 3.9, depending on the council. So obviously that nudges the bills up. But I think at the executive level, we're doing what we can in the department to mitigate all the pressures and the difficulties that are there.
And have you had a discussion within your department of going to turnover rather than just the issue of that rate bill on rental value? Or that hasn't happened, or is it likely to happen?
That would be a complete change to the rating system. I mean, it stops being rates and then becomes kind of corporation tax. So I think we would need to get into a more detailed piece of work on changing the taxation system.
Thanks. Well done.
Okay. What do you, Pat?
Thanks, Chair.
Judith, I understand you're leaving us, and
Yes.
Ian has the pleasure of staying.
Yes.
Or maybe it's all the way. So thank you very much, and appreciate what I suppose I'll say to both of you, the work you've supposed to all MLAs, no doubt, because I think LPS has done a lot of work this past couple of years, and that has to be thanked, you know, to be fair. And you're doing a good job on one hand. I appreciate you have to ask for money, but everybody liked you this past 2 years more so for giving money out. So thank you very much, Judith, and appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, we'll now receive an oral brief from LPS again. Ian's obviously staying with us, and Angela McGrath, Commissioner of Valuation. I'm going to draw your attention to papers for this item is on the clerk's briefing paper at page 81, departmental brief at page 85, previous paper on rates from the University, Ulster University Economic Policy Centre, page 93, and previous departmental correspondence on their 2019 rates review at page 113. So Ian, you're obviously welcome, and then we'll just wait on Angela.
Afternoon.
Afternoon. Angela, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Hope you hadn't too long to wait. I'll just let you get settled a moment there, and then if you want to give us a wee bit of opening comments, and then we'll yourself or Ian, whichever one you want to do it, Angela, and then we'll take some questions if that's okay. So whenever you're ready, I'll be enough.
Okay, just have a few.
No problem.
Bit of a summary for you of the paper. So I want to thank the committee very much for the opportunity to brief you on the progress with Reval 2023. The outcome of the exercise will be the revaluation of all the almost 75,000 non-domestic properties for rates purposes in Northern Ireland, and the new values will form the basis of the non-domestic rates from the 1st of April 2023. I've provided the committee with a briefing in advance of this session, and that covers the background to the revaluation, the purpose of the exercise and the progress to date. But to briefly recap, rates are a form of taxation based on property values. Non-domestic properties are valued for rates on the basis of the net annual value, or NAV, of the property, which is essentially an annual rent that the property would be expected to achieve in the market, vacant and available to let. The NAV of every property is recorded in the non-domestic valuation list published by the Commissioner of Valuation for Northern Ireland, which is myself. The property tax in the form of a rates bill is calculated by adding together the regional rate poundage and the district rate poundage for the relevant council, and by multiplying the NAV by the combined poundage figure. Because NAVs should reflect market rents, the valuation list needs updating from time to time to make sure that changes in the property market are factored into the valuations and ultimately to the rates bills. This happens through a revaluation exercise undertaken by valuers in land and property services. In a non-domestic revaluation, all NAVs are assessed at the same date, known as the antecedent valuation date. Using the same common date is important to ensure all properties are taxed on the same basis. At this point, it may be useful to reiterate that the purpose of a revaluation is to determine how the tax burden should be distributed amongst ratepayers. The evidence that we use to determine that redistribution is information from the market. a revaluation does not change how much money is raised through the tax. Previous non-domestic revaluations took place here in 1977, 1997, 2003, 2015 and 2020. Feedback from businesses through rates consultation exercises, the most recent of which was in 2019, have indicated a strong desire in the business community for more frequent revaluations. This is because less frequent revaluations can result in large swings in rate liability between locations and sectors if there has been a significant change in market rents for those sectors or locations since the previous revaluation. More frequent revaluations smooth out the size of those changes, making the tax more predictable. Reval 2023 was announced by the Minister of Finance in June 2021, and this will be the quickest revaluation ever carried out here, coming just 3 years after the publication of the current list in 2020. The decision to move to the next revaluation quickly was taken partly as a response to the pandemic, but also it acts on the commitments made in recent years by successive finance ministers to conduct more frequent revaluations, and it is also aligned to the aspiration in England, Scotland and Wales to move to a 3-year cycle of revaluations as a standard feature of the rating system. In terms of progress to date, revaluations are obviously large, complex projects. Building on our experience in previous revaluations, LPS has put in place a detailed project plan for Reval 2023 that involves tackling the task in phases. Phase 1 was the collection of market rents, trading information and construction costs at the antecedent valuation date. Phase 2 is the analysis of the rental and market information, and this will continue across the project as new information becomes available. And Phase 3 is the important valuation and review phases in preparation for publication of the new list with almost 75,000 NAVs by the end of March 2023. In terms of progress to date, the project has proceeded in line with expectations, and we are on track to deliver the new list on schedule. There are no indications at this time of any issues that may place the timescales at risk. And to date, the bulk of the rental collection through the rent and lease questionnaires has been completed. LPS valuers have moved to the analysis of that information and have begun applying preliminary valuations to property. At this point, preliminary NAVs have been assessed for around 18,500 properties, representing just under 25% in total. These preliminary NAVs are all subject to review and verification, but this is good progress. The figure will increase daily until all the property is valued by late 2022. LPS has and will continue to engage throughout the exercise with key stakeholder groups from the business community and directly with ratepayers and their representatives, aiming wherever possible to reach agreement on the proposed valuations. The outcome of Reval 2023 won't be known until the end of 2022. LPS, however, is aware that many sectors will expect to see rates reductions to reflect the impact felt by businesses from the COVID pandemic and other economic factors during 2020 and 2021. The experience of previous valuations is that the outcome is likely to include a mixture of changes. Some values will increase, some will decrease, and others will remain unchanged. And different locations and sectors will see degrees of change relative to one another. This is all dictated by property market activity. So towards the end of this year, LPS plans to give ratepayers the opportunity to see their proposed NAV for Reval 2023, and if they wish to, they can request a review of those NAVs in advance of the new valuation list coming into effect in April 2023. A draft schedule of values will also be made available to councils and to the department in advance of that to allow them to begin analysis leading to the setting of the regional and district rates for 2023. At this stage, I can't brief the committee on the actual outcomes as we are literally in the thick of the analysis and the valuation phase, which will continue for many months to come. However, I will be happy to provide a more in-depth briefing to the committee towards the end of 2022 when the picture regarding the outcome of Reval 2023 is clearer. So that's a brief overview of where we've got to so far. I'm very happy to take questions from the committee.
Okay, you're happy enough hearing the questions, okay. A couple of questions. Angela, You referred to phase 1. Are we now in the middle of phase 1? So obviously, antecedent date, 1st of October 2021. You then wrote out to businesses at a point in time. So at what point does that communication to come back? Is that over now? And have they come back, and what are they saying, and what percentage of feedback are you getting from them?
Okay, so the main phase of writing out to businesses took place between October and December of last year.
Okay.
We are still continuing to and will continue to receive information coming back. I know we had some feedback from businesses that in the run-up to Christmas they didn't have the time to do it, so we are still receiving information back. In terms of the figures that we have received, there's 74,800 properties altogether, and at this point in time we have received through our online rent and lease questionnaire returns just over 25,000.
So that's what, third? What's that like, going back other years for revals? Is that good, bad?
It's higher than what we would have received in the 2020 revaluation.
So would that tell you that people sees the benefit of communicating with you instead of hiding it in the cupboard, the letter?
I think the fact that what we have been asking ratepayers to do is to bring us forward information. We can only work on the information on what the property market is doing, and if they are if the market out there is seeing reductions in rental values because of COVID, and we aren't given that information, then it's very hard for us to take that sort of information into account. We have been very clear with ratepayers that this is their opportunity to provide us with the market information that may influence how the NAVs end up, or that will influence how the NAVs end up. And if they don't give us the information, then we can't take it into account. There's no point in not giving it to us.
Does that go against them? Let's say a business in Cookstown doesn't communicate with you, Angela, for example, and then you provide an NAV. Does that weaken their case for challenge? Is it, yeah. Does that weaken their case for challenge, or what is it?
So if a property comes forward and it is a rented property and they haven't provided us with that rental information, we can only go on the basis of the rental information that we've been provided with. So we look at the basket of rents that have been provided to us, and we assess what a typical property would let for in that general locality. If the rent then comes forward subsequently as part of a challenge or an appeal, we will look at what the rent is and whether or not that fits in with the general pattern. And if it would indicate that there's, the general pattern is, she ought to have taken that into account, then we can look at that at the time. But in general, we don't necessarily look at the individual rent on an individual property. It's the basket of rents that we have and what the typical property
in an area
for in that locality.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at what point do you stop taking those, doesn't matter where they're at, those businesses coming back? So you've got a third. At what point do you say, right, we're not really looking anymore? Or at what point do you say we've had enough information in Cookstown or Strabane or wherever?
Well, we won't ever really get to that stage. We'll continue to review the values right up until the
So there's not a cut-off point?
We haven't shut down the website for getting the rent and lease information in, and that won't be done until probably the end of 2022, so we can continue. What we were trying to do was get the bulk of the information in between that period of time, because obviously it takes quite a bit of effort and time to analyse the information that's received in, and what we want to do is get it in as quickly as possible, as early as possible, so that we get the best picture possible, that we can move through to the different phases of the actual valuation phases.
And one final question for me. You referred to the number you've got back in, or the number of NAVs you're looking at. Are you seeing any change? Is COVID affecting that in any way? Bear in mind the snapshot in time was the 1st of October. So are you seeing any reduction generally?
Well, what we're looking at, the way we've approached this is we're doing it in chunks of the same types of properties. So the plan is that we've started off with the warehousing and the industrial type properties, and then we will move on to the office properties, and then we will move on to the shops, but we're also looking at the more unusual type properties as well at the same time. So we've done quite a bit of work on the warehousing type properties, and what we're seeing at this point in time, because we have quite a lot of rental information that has been provided to us, and what we're seeing is that certainly in that sector, the rental values are holding up pretty well. And in fact, there's been an increase in some localities, and that really shouldn't come as a terrible surprise to anybody, because anybody that follows the property market and the business commentary. There is a demand out there for warehousing and logistics type accommodation, and that's being reflected in the rents that we have been seeing coming through in some of the locations where there has been some increases. But that may not necessarily translate into the other sectors. So we just have to, we're just tackling them at different points in time. But that also, that's what a reval is for. It's to get the what the market is actually doing out there, and to rebalance the values in the valuation list according to what the market is doing.
Okay, thank you. Alicia?
Margaret, I was thank you, Rove. Angela, you're very welcome here.
Thank you.
Angela, just that I think in your statement that there was an implication that there would be an overall reduction in valuation for the first time ever, and that given that the revaluation exercises are meant to be revenue neutral, how then, would one sort of explain that?
So what happens after a revaluation is that we take a look at the overall change in a district and across Northern Ireland. So that then allows the regional rate to be adjusted. So if, say for example, just to take nice round numbers, the revenue that you had to bring in was £100 million in a particular district, and at the end of the revaluation process, the valuations, total number of valuations and total value have gone up by 5%. Then you reduce your rate by 5%, you still end up bringing in revenue of £100 million. By the same token, then that means that if the total value decreases, then the district council will have to look at, if it wanted to bring in the same amount of revenue, at increasing the district rate to bring it back up. So the neutrality point is easier to explain whenever you're going up, okay, and the values are going up, because you want to make sure that people don't feel it's just an exercise in trying to extract more rates. It is a redistribution exercise, but the same principle applies as the overall value goes down. Now, at this point, we don't know. All we can say is, because of the particular circumstances that we're working in at the minute with the pandemic and everything else that's taken place, there is a possibility for the first time ever that you might see an overall decrease in value, either in some districts or overall.
And yet, no, there's still that expectation that rental value is, if anything, in the increase?
Just in that one sector, and only in certain locations in that one sector. So for the warehousing sector, it won't necessarily translate into other sectors.
Just one other area that I was trying to get my head around as well too, when we talked about sort of the sports organisations and the likes, and that they've been done via contractors method. What effectively is that?
So there are three main types of valuation methods that we use for different types of property. The main one that we would use is the comparative basis, and that would be for the likes of shops, offices, warehouses, factories that are typically rented, and there's lots of rental information for that.
Yeah.
The second type is ones that are valued by reference to their volume of trade, and that would be the likes of hotels and petrol filling stations, quarries, pubs, those types of things where there is a profit motive. And when you're trying to assess the rental value for the property, which is what we're trying to do for all properties when we assess an NAV, it's essentially a rental value. The tenant, when they're coming to look at the property, would look at what volume of trade they could essentially try to achieve from that property, and assess what rental value they could then afford to pay for that. And the third type of properties are those which are neither typically rented nor have a profit motive. And in doing that, we we use a recognised methodology called the contractor's basis, which is essentially estimating the cost of replacing that building and devaluing it down, plus the land that it's sitting on, and devaluing that down, but using the decap rate to a rental value. So that the decap rate is a statutory percentage adjustment to bring it down to a rental value.
Sorry, you couldn't say that again, maybe in
Right, so
simpler English. I just wasn't actually catching that.
This, if you mentioned sports stadium, so let's say you're building a sports stadium, or trying to work out the rates for a sports stadium. So what Angela has to do and her team has to do is work out what would it cost you to build that stadium. You make an adjustment on that depending on the age of it. So on your stadium, obviously, it's got greater value than an older one, for example. And then you apply a percentage rate, which is called a decapitalisation rate, and that converts the capital value of the property or the construction value of it into a notional annual rental value. So it's pretty much the same way that a property developer would try to work out what he needs to charge in rent in order to be able to make a profit.
Okay, that's grand. Thank you.
I have a wee question, and then we may have to suspend because we're about to have a vote in the next few minutes. ATMs, we discussed it briefly about ATMs, and maybe just if the members are happy enough to get a bit of an explanation on this one. An ATM machine in a rural locality, let's say outside a spar, sitting outside or outside a forecourt, or one inside, what way does that work from a rating point of view? So I'm the owner of a shop, a spar, and one sits outside, and it's going to be covered by this SR, but one's inside. Does that ATM affect my business? And by the way, for the record, I don't have a business, but I'm just using it as an example.
You mean one of those
Yes.
wee standalone
Yes. So
ones? that are
let's say it's
sitting
an
inside?
external one,
No.
and not wall mounted, or wall mounted, or internally. So will that? So a rural community that needs an ATM and needs access to cash, me as an example business owner, will I be penalised for providing that service from a rating point of view? So any method outside or inside the business.
So we're valuing physical property here.
Okay.
So the standalone ones that are located inside shops aren't physical property. in
So like a
themselves.
fridge, they're no different than a fridge.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they aren't valued separately. The one that's on the wall or has a separate structure outside may be it may be valued separately if it is considered to be a separate property from a rating point of view. It may then also just form part of the main property itself.
Okay. Apologise. We're going to have to suspend at this point. All right. Members?
Okay, members, we'll just suspend whether it votes rather than appointing a chairperson. If we just take 10 minutes, is that?
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound.
Members will resume our meeting. Angeline, apologise for that sort of sudden abrupt ending. Back to my point on the ATMs. So we discussed ATMs inside the business, ATMs outside. How do you change? We got a list of rural locations. I can't remember like Kilkeel. There's different locations with Friday, etc. How does that be increased? So say there was an ATM outside a business that's not on that rural list. How do you get that ATM on that list, or the place that's not on the list?
Well, the rural definition was based on information from NISRA, so there's a rural and urban definition in Northern Ireland that's used, so we've identified those rural wards by working with the Statistics and Research Agency. There's also another point, which is that not every ATM on the outside of a premises will be separately rated. So Angela can explain the intricacies of the rating legislation. So it has to be an ATM which is separately rated, and then it has to be inside one of those identified rural wards. I think we're going to get you a list and a map.
Yeah. So
The numbers of those properties have been reducing over the last couple of years since a recent Supreme Court case decision that came out in I think it was 2018 or 2019, which led to us to have to review how some of those ATMs are valued and whether they ought to be separately valued. So I think we started off something like 90 plus properties, and that's we've reviewed all of the ATMs, how they're valued, and we're continuing to do that in those rural wards. Well, not actually just in the rural wards across the piece, as to whether or not they remain to be separately valued or not, or whether they are subsumed into the main building.
and is that a separate rates bill for that ATM, or is it just separately indicated on your rates bill?
It'll be a separate bill.
Separate bill.
Yeah.
So anybody that has a rates bill for an ATM externally, apart from those 43, should be asking the question, why am I getting this?
Well, no, they're probably still liable to pay the rates, though. I mean, as Angela's explained, the numbers will be reduced.
Yeah.
Okay, so it will depend on the particular location, but it was because there are fewer options to get access to cash in rural communities that the rural distinction was made, as opposed to making them free in all.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, thank you. Mr. Wells, you're on next. Yes, here, fine, go ahead, Jim.
Yes. Okay. First of all, can I say that throughout my dealings with LPS, I think this is the last opportunity I'll probably have to speak to you. There has been an air of competency about LPS in all my dealings with them, and today is no different. So all I can say to you is I've only been at Stormont 27 years, but I've always found that dealing with land and property services has been one of the most pleasant experiences, and there's been plenty which haven't. Now, just to follow on what Keith was saying, I made the point at the last hearing about ATMs that one by one, all of our rural towns are losing their banks. I've lost half of my banks in South Down in the last decade. And towns which are not defined as rural, sadly, will inevitably lose their banking. And the retention of an ATM is absolutely crucial. So therefore, I think it's unfortunate that a town like Kilkeel could end up being left without any ATMs, any banks, and yet be not be defined as rural when it's 12 to 14 miles to the nearest bank. So we will pursue that particular issue. Sorry, would you believe there's somebody at the door? Hold on. Sorry.
Hello.
I'm live on air.
All right, okay.
Sorry for that. It's my daughter would call at the worst possible time. So sorry about that. Someone's as bad as calling in his pigeon. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, at one stage I thought you were going to say it's somebody canvassing, but we'll not go there. I wouldn't dread to think anybody canvassing that
I'm
house.
so sorry about that. Look, folks, can you move on to somebody else, and then I'll come straight back. Have you anybody else, Keith?
Well, there's only yourself, Jim. If you want to, are you okay to ping out the question?
I've been locked down for 8 days, and that's my daughter delivering food for me. So anyhow, quickly readjusting to his situation, and I'm totally dishevelled. What I would say to you is, Melissa has asked my question, but a point I'd like to make is you're relying upon people like myself who did return the questionnaire and did give you the information. Do you have other sources of information? Do you have embedded agents within the industries that were working out what rents are being payable, or are you simply relying on the self-provision of information by your customers? How do you come to an independent view as to what is an economic rent?
We are relying on the rental lease questionnaires, but that's not the sole source of our information. We are following up on, for example, shopping centres and retail parks with the agents for those shopping centres and retail parks to get the rental schedules for those. My staff in the evaluation directorate are pursuing where we know that there have been new lettings that have taken place, and we will make an approach to the occupier of the property to try and get the rental information. So we're trying to get as much information independently on top of the rent and lease questionnaires.
I'd say it is supplemented, though it's not a very significant thing by comparison to the written lease questionnaires, that we've had to get information such as copies of leases from people applying for some of the grants over the past 2 years, and that information is also available to be fed into the calculation, so that might just simply duplicate what we've got from other sources.
And how confident are you that the information you have is correct?
Well, the rent and lease questionnaires, there's a requirement for a declaration on the bottom of the rent and lease questionnaire that the information that's been provided is the full information that has been requested. But our valuers may make contact with the ratepayer again just to check a few details that they have understood what has been provided. If there is any doubt over the rent that has been provided, it will be, we'll try and verify it from other sources.
If this whole process produces a lower than expected rateable income, who picks up the tabs?
Well, that's a political decision then about what the result for that would be. So, as explained to Mr. McHugh, if we do end up with a total NAV which is lower, if you wanted to retain the same level of rates revenue, then a decision would need to be taken about increasing the rates in order to maintain that. So you could, I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but you could end up in a situation where everybody's net annual value is reduced, but the actual rates they pay remain the same, as if what is decided by district councils or by the executive is that the amount of revenue has to be retained. The other option is that there may be a decision to take less revenue, but that would require reductions in expenditure plans. Now, all of those decisions are political. They're not ones that we take in LPS, so it would fall to then elected councillors and ministers in the executive.
Thank you.
Okay. Ian, Angela, any members, any more questions? We're content with that. Sorry, but that Jim's interference says it's one of those ones for social media.
It's going to be Amazon now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for coming along, and I appreciate the information. It's very informative. We could probably talk for 2 hours on rates and still not know a little bit less, but anyway. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate that. Okay.
Item 17.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got it.
Same as that. I presume. Yeah. Same.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, members, we're moving on now to item 17, Forward Work Programme. A draft Forward Work Programme is at page 506 of your packs. It has been hoped that NIB RAC would brief on nearly zero energy buildings guidance today. They were unavailable, but will brief on the 16th of March, which is next week. There are a number of statute rules before the Assembly next week. As is usual, the Chairperson or Deputy Chairperson will offer some commentary on the rules under consideration. Additionally, the further consideration stage of the defamation bill is before the House next week. As the committee has not cited on the amendments to the bill, it is not proposed that the Chairperson or Deputy Chairperson offer any comments at this stage. Members, any views on that? Those couple of topics? No? Okay. Is the committee content with the Forward Work Programme as drafted? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Any other business? Is any other business any member wants to raise or discuss? No. Okay, and the next meeting of the Committee for Finance will be on Wednesday, the 16th of March, 2022 at 2 p.m. in the Senate Chamber and on Starleaf. Thank you very much, members.
Thank you.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern